Hey everyone, Lance here. I know it's been a while since I've made a video, but I really want to get back into it. And I'm moving soon, so I thought it would be a good time to drain the loop in my PC, do some cleaning and servicing on it, take the blocks apart and clean them up, and see if I could potentially get some better temperatures. It's the middle of winter here in New Zealand at the moment, and I'm getting temperatures in the mid to high 60 degrees Celsius, by the way. So I think that's a little bit too hot for something with a custom water-cooled loop. So I want to give everything a good clean and strip down and see if I can improve those temperatures. I'll drain the loop, run some distilled water through it all, and then I will take it all apart, ready for the move. Once I'm moved in, I'll put it all back together because, 65 to 68 degrees in CSGO at 1080 is pretty ridiculous in my opinion, so let's get to it. I've moved into my new place and I've filmed a whole section on draining the loop back there, but I decided to not show that. Instead I wanted to discuss the fact that if you look at the loop back here, the reservoir, some of this tubing here has drained, but there's still coolant and distilled water in a lot of the other sections. There is a drain tap on my loop. It's below here, so below the reservoir I have a pump in the basement of the case, and then off the back of that is a drain tap. That is what I've been using to drain the loop, with several flushes with distilled water and tilting the case on many different angles. I'm not having the best success draining all the coolant out. So I moved it with everything in there. There was no leaks, nothing came loose, so I was very happy about that. But what I've decided to do is replace this top radiator. It's an XSPC 240mm radiator, and I'm going to replace it with this EK Waterblocks radiator that I used to have in a build. Now it's a little bit dirty, it's second hand, but I'm cleaning all of these components, which is what the white vinegar is for. I'll be following a guide that EK have on their website, and that has different products you can and can't use, or should and shouldn't use, I should say. Now the reason for using this radiator in the top is, as well as the fittings here, there's also two fittings or plugs on the back here. So being in the top of the case, if I'm having trouble filling it or draining it because there's a lot of air trapped in the ceiling of the case, I can open these, and as long as I'm careful, I'm going to be able to let that trapped air out or let air in to replace the water in the system. I also am thinking maybe there's an issue with the flow direction of my coolant, because currently as it stands, the coolant comes from the pump up this tube into the first radiator in the front of the case, through here, back across to the second radiator, from the second radiator to the CPU, to GPU 1, GPU 2, and then back into the reservoir. I think going through two radiators before any other components could be slowing down the flow, and I've only ever used Lang DDC pumps, so I've decided to get this Thermaltake PR22 D5 Plus, which uses a D5 pump. I also like the idea of a pump res combo, which is why I've chosen this, and I've got Thermaltake fans in my build, and I actually really like those fans, so I thought I'd try out some more Thermaltake products, see what I thought of them. This has RGB lighting in it also, as I don't have any LEDs in this case other than the fans at the moment. So I'll open this up in a second, I can show you what's inside the box. And for additional cleaning and flushing and all of that sort of good stuff, I've got a Mayhem's Blitz basic pack, which just has some cleaning products, which allows me to flush the entire system before I put my coolant into it. I've also got some spare tubing left over, as I'll probably need to change some of my runs. Now the reason I mentioned this pump when I talked about flow direction is because the flow from that pump will mean that it will go into GPU 2, then GPU 1, then CPU, and then through the radiators. So the radiators aren't going to slow the flow to the other components down, which I'm hoping will help with my temperatures. I'm also hoping the D5 pump will be a bit quieter than the DDC pump, as the DDC pump in here has quite a significant whining noise to it. So I'm hoping the D5 will get rid of that whining noise, because currently, other than the fans when it's under sort of heavy load and it's getting into the mid to high 60 degrees Celsius range, which like I said earlier, I'm not the happiest with. I'd like to see it lower, potentially low 60s, high 50s would be what I'd feel comfortable with. Here's the hard part. Because it's not draining the whole loop, I'm going to need to disconnect one of my pieces of tubing. Now obviously doing that opens the loop at two ends, so I'm going to need to find a way where I can catch any water that's going to run out of those. First of all, I'm going to drain out any remaining coolant from the loop. So I'm assuming that this tube here is going to drain when I open the tap. So you see how even with that drain tap open, we still have coolant in some of these other tubes. I've put a paper towel down over this GPU because I'm pretty confident that remaining little bit of coolant is going to spill somewhere when I undo this, but I think that is inevitable. I'm going to undo that collar, and I'm probably just going to bend this to get it out, because I'll probably redo this bend. Okay, cool, there's the O-ring. That O-ring still feels pretty good, and that's what I thought would happen, so lucky I had these paper towels down here. Can you see in there, in the tube, there's a whole lot of grit and debris. That's all crap that would have been floating around the loop. So that is definitely a good sign that this clean was well overdue. I wanted to point out, if you can see inside this fitting here, it's filled with white gunk. This has actually gotten solid. It won't all completely wipe off with my finger, but that will all be cleaned out. There you can see around here a lot of that gunk once again. So again, this loop is so dirty. There's probably no surprise to some of you that the cooling was pretty poor on my loop. Pretty much all of the components are out now. I just need to remove the front radiator and the pump from the basement, and then I'm going to start planning out the new loop for the system and see how we go from there. It's pretty late now. It's about 2:30ish AM. But I've got this piece of tubing run, I've got the bigger radiator in the system, and that rear tubing run, and also the new Thermaltake reservoir. Now I know I told you I was going to open this up on camera, the Pacific PR22D5 pump reservoir combo, but I was running out of time. I wanted to get a decent amount done before I went to sleep. So basically all that was in the box was obviously the pump reservoir combo, some mounting hardware. There was also this little controller for the RGB. We can get a nice little peel. You couldn't see it, but hopefully you could hear it. Some cables, and also if you weren't wall mounting the reservoir, it also had a pair of these brackets. But you can kind of see in these screw holes, there's already scratching on the metal. I didn't try once to mount it using these. That metal was already scratched out of the box. Why? I don't know. Maybe this was a return. Maybe it was just in the factory, or potentially it's just how they are from maybe manual testing. Who knows? But anyway, I'll get in close and show you how I mounted the reservoir to the back of that case. But I used a 120mm fan mount, flipped the opposite way on the back wall, and then these clip-on reservoir mounts are screwed into that, with also a spacer, which is the rubber spacer off the bottom of this EK pump here. If I unscrew one, I essentially screwed these little rubber spacers through the back wall and onto that bracket, which is holding the reservoir. Very, very sturdy. I'm happy with how it's mounted, and I'm pretty confident it's not going to go anywhere. So I'll get in close and show you guys some of that, and then I'm going to get to pulling apart the CPU and GPU blocks and giving them a clean, ready to reinstall before I do my final bends. As you can see up here, I've used this square 3-way fitting. Now the bottom isn't being used, however I didn't want a 90 degree and a 90 degree. I thought it looked a little bit tidier, having this almost like a feature showing off the EK logo. And in this end I have also a 90 degree and a spacer. Now some of you may be wondering why I haven't just bent a piece of tubing, and that is because in the past I had with the thinner radiator, this ran directly across, and I had a curved tubing or curved piece of tubing up into this back part of the radiator. Now that with heat, essentially it just went bloop and just dropped out fully. So I decided to just use a straight piece of tubing and try and do something clever with the fittings to make it look like it's done on purpose rather than to overcome a problem of bending the tube. Not out of laziness, it took hours to get this right with the radiator heights and positions and things. Also in the back there you may be able to see that I've got the drain back into the reservoir. I think that looks very tidy with just that short piece of tubing into the 90 degree bend and straight down into the reservoir, which obviously has a drain back tube inside of it. For the mounting, if we get in up high, I hope you guys can see that. In here you can see that spacer and the bracket I was talking about just mounted off the center, but like I said, this pump is not going anywhere. It's very, very sturdy. So that's the progress I've made so far. Now that it's done, it may not look like a huge amount, but it took me hours upon hours to get this far, and I think that's mostly the hard part done. I've cleaned the radiators and got them installed. Now I did film it, but it's not really that exciting. Essentially what I did was, in a plastic tub, I poured vinegar into the radiators and then used a couple of plug fittings to block off the ports, sloshed it around, and that in theory, or I'm hoping, will clear out a lot of the debris that is inside the fins of those radiators. I then drained out as much as I could before repeating the same process with distilled water. There may still be some vinegar in there, but keep in mind I still have to run the Mayhem's Blitz kit through the loop. So what I'm doing to clean the fittings is I am just soaking them in some distilled water and then using this toothbrush to clean them. So in the end I opted to get a brand new toothbrush rather than just using an old one, just for cleanliness sake. And as you can see, the distilled water is discoloured quite a bit from the debris from the white coolant. So it's built up quite a lot. If you look on this fitting plug here, you can see how much of that has built up on all of the fittings. So that's how I'm doing that. And I've done some more loop planning here, if that will focus. So I'm keeping it consistent with the square fitting here, also doing the same here, and my drain port will come out the front, and I'm going to have a run that will come up and bend and across into the GPU. Top, I will just clean with soapy water and then rinse off with isopropyl alcohol. And this will get cleaned, like I said, with the vinegar and a toothbrush. And the other bits will just get a good wipe down. This will get a rinse with some distilled water. You can see quite a bit of crap actually sitting on this too. Now something I've noticed with my GPUs is that when I took them apart, you can see there's the little flow plate here. It should be sitting in the center right here, but it's sitting down a little bit lower. I'm wondering if that potentially is why I had quite bad cooling issues with the GPUs, and maybe even why there was a lot of air bubbles coming from GPU 1. This was GPU number 1, the top card in the system, so I'll fix that up. The other GPU I've taken apart and cleaned. That one is ready to go back in once this one is also cleaned. After that, the loop will be finished and I can put the Mayhem's Blitz cleaning kit in and then fill it up with distilled water, and then I'll probably run it for a couple of weeks to make sure that it's going to run leak free before I decide on some kind of coolant that I want to run in there, what colour and type and that sort of thing. I'm not going to be able to show off the RGB capabilities of the Thermaltake Pacific reservoir, as one of the cables needed for the RGB lighting system was missing from the packaging. So I'm going to be contacting the retailer about that, but I'm pretty disappointed. That was kind of one of the main selling points for me, but disappointed by that. So I'm hoping I can get that sorted out and be able to have that RGB lighting in the future. I had already filmed an outro for this video, but I wanted to let you guys know how it had been doing. So the loop has been together and leak free for about 2 days. I've been enjoying Borderlands 3, obviously. I was a little bit disappointed that it doesn't have SLI support and I can only run it on low settings on one 980 Ti. That of course is at ultra wide resolution, 3440 by 1440, and it still does look amazing on low, so I can't really complain. But you can see the system back here and it's running really well. I really like having the D5 pump over the DDC. There's no low whine, and I would have appreciated if they had put PWM control in the pump, but DC is completely fine. I'm actually running it at full speed because that's what it was set to out of the box, and it's not actually too loud and I seem to get really good flow. Temperature wise, the system is running in Borderlands 3 which uses a single GPU. As I said, the GPU runs mid to low 50 degrees Celsius mark, so that I thought was really good, and when I overclock it I'm hitting 61 degrees C max after 8 hours of continuous gaming. Running other benchmarks that utilize both GPUs, it's about the same but across both cards. The CPU is sitting in the low 60s continuously, and the GPU, or the second GPU, which is only sitting idle when running Borderlands 3, is sitting in the mid to low 40 degrees Celsius mark. So I'm really happy with the temperatures, I'm really happy with the sound. It's nice and quiet now compared to before. So overall, I am so happy with how the system is going now. And I actually really like having clear coolant in the loop, so I think I'm going to do something fun when I put some coolant in there. I also don't have any LEDs in there anymore, so I might tie something in together. Just a little bit of a spoiler there for the next video. But I do appreciate you all a lot for watching. Feel free to like and subscribe down below. And if you want to see what I get up to in my own time, or I guess this is my own time, but what I get up to outside of this kind of thing, feel free to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Links will be down below. And hey, I'll see you all in the next one. So overall, I'm extremely happy. There goes my light.